The fake pregnancy.
In a small village there lived a man called Tando. Tando had always been a simple man. He was a hard-working carpenter. He was known for his generosity and his gentle spirit, traits that made him beloved by his neighbors. His family, however, had been small. Growing up as an only child after his mother's difficult labor, he knew the value of family and longed for one of his own. His wife was his world. They had been married for 5 years, and every day he woke up, he thanked the heavens for her. She was beautiful, graceful, and intelligent, trait that he admired greatly. Tando believed that his marriage was a gift, and like any devoted husband, he did everything in his power to make sure Zola was happy. Yet, despite their love, one thing had eluded them: a child. In the early years of their marriage, Zola had been unconcerned about not becoming pregnant. But as the season passed, the pressure from the village elders and nosy neighbors began to mount. People whispered behind their backs, and sometimes the whisper found their way to Tando. Maybe there is something wrong with them, some said. It's unusual for couples to be married this long without a child. Perhaps they should see the healer. Zola, who had always been unconcerned, began to feel the weight of those whispers. She had always been seen as the perfect wife, the woman who could do no wrong. But with each passing year of barrenness, her image was beginning to crack. One evening, after yet another comment about their lack of children from a well meaning elder, Zola made a decision that could change everything. One morning, after months of Tando beginning to accept that they might never have children, Zola came out from their small bedroom with a wild smile on her face. Tando, she began, her voice shaking slightly with excitement. I have wonderful news. Tando's heart raised. Zola's eyes sparkled in a way he hadn't seen in a long time. He braced himself for what was to come. I'm pregnant, she announced. Tando felt as if the earth was going round and he had to shift. For a moment, he was speechless. The words echoed in his mind. I'm pregnant. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground in pure joy. Zola, my love, we are going to have a baby. You have made me the happiest man alive. The news quickly spread throughout the village, and soon people who had once whispered rumors now came to offer congratulations. Women brought gifts and shared advice with Zola. Tando walked through the village with his head high in pride. He had always been world-liked, but now he was seen as complete, a man who could soon become a father. For the first week, Tando couldn't stop himself from smiling every time he looked at Zola. He worked longer hours, saving up for the baby's arrival. He began crafting a cradle in his spare time. He had even started building a small extension to their house, turning it into a proper home for the family that was to come. But as the month passed, something caught his attention. Zola's belly, while slightly rounded, didn't seem to grow as much as he had expected. He brushed off the thought at first, reasoning that not every woman's pregnancy looked the same. Besides, he had never been around a pregnant woman for very long. What did he know? Zola, for her part, was always quick with an explanation. Some women don't show as much until the later months, she said one evening, smiling as she lay beside him. You will see, soon enough, I will be as round as a melon. Tando trusted her. Why couldn't he? Zola was his wife, the woman he had loved For years, he had no reasons to doubt her. Months passed and still there was little change in Zola's appearance. By the time she claimed to be 7 months pregnant, Tando had grown more concerned. He watched other pregnant women in the village, women who were supposed to be around the same age as Zola. Their bellies were swelling, their movements slowly. But Zola remained mostly the same, her slight belly still not resembling what he thought a 7 month pregnancy should look like. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Tando, before speaking, smiled and said, Zola, he began carefully, are you sure everything is all right with the baby? You don't seem as big as the other women. Zola's face remained calm. She reached out and placed his hand on her belly, while a faint movement seemed to pass under her skin. See, the baby is moving, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Every pregnancy is different, Tando. Our baby is healthy. You worry too much. Tando nodded, feeling foolish for doubting her. The movement had reassured him, though it had been faint. He blamed himself for letting his worries get the better of him. Zola was right. Every pregnancy was different. Who was he to question her experience? Yet, despite her reassurance, Zola became secretive. She spent more time alone in their bedroom, often locking the door for hours at a time. When Tando asked if she needed anything, she could brush him off, saying she was just tired and needed rest. One day, when Tando came home early from the carpentry workshop, he noticed something strange. Zola had left the house, but she had forgotten to lock their bedroom door. Curious, he stepped inside. The room was messy, as always. But sometimes something caught his eye. An old rag, bundle of clothes under their bed. Tando knelt down and pulled it out, unwrapping it carefully. What he found inside sent a chill down his spine. The bundle contained several pieces of fabric sewn together in the shape of a small pillow. It was roughly the size of a pregnant belly. Tando stared at it, his mind racing to make sense of what he was seeing. Why could Zola have this? Sadly, a memory came flooding back. How Zola had once joked that she could trick the entire village into believing she was pregnant if she wanted to. At the time, he had seemed like nothing more than an offhand comment, but now it felt prophetic. Zola had faked her pregnancy. Tando's heart pounded in his chest. He felt dizzy as the reality of the situation hit him. All these months, all the excitement, the hope, the joy, it had been a lie. His wife, the woman he trusted above all others, had deceived him. He sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the fake belly in his hand. His mind raced with questions, but the one that rose to the surface again and again was why? When Zola returned home later that afternoon, Tando was waiting for her. He sat in the living room, the fake belly lay out on the table in front of him. The moment she saw it, her face changed. She was in shock. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Tando broke the silence. Why? His voice was barely above a whisper. Zola's eyes filled with tears. She fell on the floor, her hands shaking. Tando, I am so sorry. She snored. I didn't mean it to go this far. Tando's heart ached. He had never seen her so broken, but the pain of her betrayal was so deep to ignore. Why did you lie to me, Zola? He asked, his voice cracking. All these months, I thought we were having a child. You let me believe that. I was scared, she whispered. I was so scared that you could leave me, that you could think I was worthless because I couldn't give you a child. Tandos bowed in confusion. I could never think that, he said softly. You are my wife, so I love you no matter what. But the others, Zola continued, her voice shaking. The villagers, they all talking about us. They whispered about how I wasn't a real woman because I couldn't bear children. I felt like I was losing you to their gossip. Tando shook his head, his heart heavy with sorrow. You never had to do this, he said. We could have faced them together. We could have found another way. Zola snub grew louder and she buried her face in her hand. I didn't know what else to do. I felt so ashamed, so powerless. And once I started the lie, I couldn't stop. Tando stood up, his hands trying to hold his wife, but he stopped. He wanted to comfort her, but he stopped. He wanted to tell her everything could be all right, but the weight of her deception crushed him. His dreams of fatherhood, the joy he had felt, none of it had been real. I need time to think, he said quietly, turning towards the door. Zola looked up, panicking, flashing in her eyes. Tando, please. But he was already walking away. The door closed softly behind him. In the days that followed, Tando walked around the village, confused, sad. The truth of Zola's lie hurt him so much, and he couldn't bring himself to return home. He spent his days by the river, sitting on the banks, staring at the water as it flowed past him. His mind was clouded with a storm of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness. He had been so ready to become a father, to build a life with Zola that included a child, and now that future had been ripped away from him. The villagers noticed his absence from home, and the workshop began to whisper again. They noticed Zoli's belly hadn't grown in months. The congratulations and friendly smiles that had once greeted Tando were replaced with rumors in the village. People began to wonder what had really been going on in the couple's home. Still, no one dared to ask him directly. Days turned into weeks, and Tando remained at the river, lost in thought. He knew he couldn't stay there forever, but the thought of returning to Zola and confronting the reality of their situation paralyzed him. He had loved her so much, and she had betrayed him in the most intimate way possible. How could you go back to her after that? Zola, meanwhile, alone, sad at home, she was always crying on the floor, thinking about their endless love, her mind racing with fear and guilt. She had made a terrible mistake, and now she was paying the price. Each passing day without Tando felt like another blow to her heart. She knew she had hurt him deeply, but she hadn't realized just how much she depended on him until he was gone. The house, one filled with warmth and laughter, now felt cold and empty. Every corner reminded her of the lie she had built, and every night she cried herself to sleep, wondering if Tando could ever come back. She misses him. His gentle presence, his smile, the way he had always made her feel safe. She longed to take back everything she had done, but she was too late. In a desperate attempt to reach him, Zola sent word to Tando's closest friend, a man named Sapon, who had known Tando since childhood. She asked him to talk to Tando, to tell him that she was sorry, that she wanted to explain herself, and that she couldn't bear the silence any longer. Sapon found Tando by the river, sitting under a tree, staring at the water. He approached slowly, sitting down beside him without saying a word. For a long time, the two men sat in silence. The only sound around them was the sound of the wind through the trees and the soft murmur of the river. Finally, Sapon spoke. Zola sent me. Tando didn't respond, his eyes still fixed on the river. She's been a mess since you left, Sapon continued. She knows she hates you, and she's sorry. She wants to talk. Tando let out a long sigh. I don't know if I can face her, he said, his voice heavy. He lied to me, Sapon. For months, she made me believe we were going to have a child. How am I supposed to forgive that? Sapon nodded, understanding his friend's pain. It's not easy, he admitted, but you love her, don't you? Tando's expression softened. I do, he said, but love isn't enough to erase what she did. No, it's not, Sapon agreed, but maybe it's enough to help you understand why she did it. She's been under a lot of pressure, Tando. The village, the whisper, the expectation, it's a lot for one person to handle. Tando frowned, his mind torn between anger and sympathy. He knew Sapon was right. Zola had been subjected to the same judgment he had, perhaps even more so as a woman, in a culture that placed so much importance on motherhood. Still, it didn't excuse what she had done. I just don't know if I can trust her again, Tando said, his voice breaking. Sapon put a hand on his shoulder. Trust can be rebuilt, he said, but only if you both willing to work for it. She made a mistake, a big one, but she's hurting too. If you walk away now, you might regret it later. Tando closed his eyes. His heart was heavy. He had spent so many years building a life with Zola, and despite the pain she had caused him, he wasn't sure he was ready to let it all away. Later that evening, Tando returned home. He opened the door slowly, and as he stepped inside, the familiar smell of the house filled his sense. Zola was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red and swollen from crying. When she saw him, she stood up. Her hands were shaking. Tando, she whispered, her voice breaking. You came back. He stood in the doorway, unsure of what to say. The silence between them stretched for a very long time. I'm sorry, Zola finally busted out, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know what to do. I was so afraid you would stop loving me because I couldn't give you a child. I felt like I had no choice. Tando's heart was broken, seeing her wife in tears and broken down. He wanted to be angry, wanted to hold on to his pain, but seeing her like that made it difficult. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. You should have told me the truth, he said, his voice calm but firm. You could have faced it together. But instead, you lied to me. You made me believe we were going to have a baby. Do you know how much that hurts? Zola nodded, her snub growing louder. I know, she choked out. I know. I should have told you. I was selfish, and I let my fear take over. I didn't want to lose you. Tando walked over to the table and sat down across from her. For a long time, they sat in silence, the weight of everything that had happened hanging in the air between them. I don't know if I can forgive you, Tando said finally, his voice soft but filled with emotion. But I do know that I love you, and maybe that's enough to start healing. Zola looked up at him, her eyes filled with hope and regret. I will do anything, Tando, she whispered. I will do anything to make this right. Just please don't leave me. Tando reached out the table and took her hands in his. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it felt like the first step toward rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. We will take it one day at a time, he said. I don't know what the future holds, but if we are going to make this work, we have to be honest with each other. No more lies, no more pretend. Zola nodded, squeezing his hand tightly. No more lies, she echoed. I promise. In weeks that followed, Tando and Zola began the slow process of rebuilding their relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the pains of the past coming back threatened to pull them apart. But each time they reminded themselves of the love that they had brought them together in the first place. The villagers, sensing that something had changed between them, continued to whisper, but Tando and Zola no longer cared. They had faced their greatest challenge and come on the other side. Scared, but still standing, they knew the road ahead couldn't be easy, but they were determined to walk it into it, hand in hand. For Tando, the future was no longer about what they had lost, but about what they could still build. And as he worked each day, craving wood and shaping new beginning, he found solace in the knowledge that love taught him a lot. And Zola, through hunting by her past mistake, found strength in Tando's forgiveness and in her own resolve to never let fear drive her again. Together, they could face whatever came next, no long burdened by illusion, but by the truth of who they were and the love they shared. Thank you. The end.